Hello there, Gluehuffers. Hello, Gluehuffers. Today, I'm going to be talking about my Social Security system. Now, what is my new Social Security system? This is brand new. I'm sure other countries have maybe thought about it. I know Singapore this is kind of like a Singaporean style Social Security system. So in the United States, we have Social Security, right? It is inherently broken. The problem is it only has $2 trillion or a little bit more than that left. In the next 6 years, that reserve will go down to zero if Congress does nothing. I propose a new solution. Instead of just buying the same crappy 15-year bonds that we've been buying for the past however long, 100 years, well, not been 100 years in Social Security. 1935 is when Social Security started. The last almost 90 years. How about instead of doing that crap, how about we decide we do something that has a higher interest rate than that? So, I propose something brand new and revolutionary. It actually gives the dignity of the American worker back. Instead of just, only a 2% return rate on your money if you live long enough. So instead, we're going to actually make it a family account. Instead of just a one big collective federal account. And all that money is going to the past generation. Instead of doing that, you pay for your own Social Security. Now, how do we do this? How do we set this up? I want to do it from the top down, and then it's going to be automatically decentralized. So, it's going to be really authoritarian at the beginning, but as time goes on, it will be more and more progressive, if that makes any sense. So basically, the federal government will mandate that every state and every individual worker has an account. And then the federal government also has an account. So, for instance, when you pay into it, 25% of your money goes straight into the Social Security system. Now, a good 17% of that money is going straight towards your Social Security. So that account will compound with bonds and stocks. Now, there's a cap on how much the stocks will be. So at the beginning, it will be 70% stocks and 30% bonds. Global stocks and global bonds, unless somebody decides they want to switch out. It's their own personal account. I don't fucking care. Anyway, I probably shouldn't have said that, but whatever. Doesn't really matter. That being said, you could switch out between international and domestic, right? International and domestic index funds, I should say. You could pick between U.S.-based, allied-based, meaning allies of the United States, or global, which I would pick. The state and the federal government, they have to go a little more global because we don't want to invest only in our own economy. It just doesn't make sense. Norway has learned this lesson. Norway actually diversifies away from Norway. They're not allowed to own any Norwegian businesses in their account under their sovereign wealth fund. So anyway, your own sovereign wealth fund will be 70% of your money will contribute to your own retirement. Now, 2% of that money will go straight to the state account. Same thing, 70% stock, 30% bond. Now, remember what I said, there's a cap on stocks. Not just that 70%, but also if everybody's personal account equals 60% of any given corporation, you have to stop buying index funds for stocks, go straight to bond index funds, and bonds in general. I would say it's about 50% bond index and 50% regular government bonds. I don't really freaking care. Maryland can figure that out and stuff like that. Federal government can figure it out. So anyway, same thing with this. However, states have 1% of any given corporation. So let's say they own 1% Amazon, they can't go any higher with that index fund. They have to stop buying stock index fund, and go straight to bond index fund. We want to make sure the economy is as decentralized as possible under this new system. Now, the federal government can own 3% of any given corporation. Every single taxpayer is doing 1% of their salary goes straight to the federal government welfare system. Now, I want to make it so you use your account first after 40 years. So let's say you work your first year, right? 40 years later, you will unlock your account. Doesn't matter how hard you work. Then that account, you could use up 3% every given year. Because I want it to be perpetual. I want families to never be poor again after a century of this Social Security system. I want something that families can inherit when they get older. I know that when you're young, you're going to be poor. And so in our society, we have to learn that poor people are young and old people are wealthy. And I want that compounding rate to be beneficial for older people because they've spent their whole lives working. Why should they have nothing to show for it? So basically what I want to do is use what the billionaires do, which is automatic indexing. If you ever look at Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, they're slowly becoming like index funds. They just diversify their investing because they can't risk it anymore. They have too much money and too much people rely on their net worth for anything. So that's why they do automatic indexing. Although Warren Buffett, you could argue, it's still very diversified. 60 businesses is a lot of freaking businesses. So the ideal is we're going to invest like billionaires with our new Social Security system. Why shouldn't we? I know the government says we're not allowed to have risk, so we block the government from voting in stocks. Now, here's another thing. I think that elections are in my opinion, are rigged and corrupt, and lottery is a better system to go. And I do think we should have some elections, but not, it should be about 75% elections, 25% lottery. Because I like the idea of having choice on who gets on the board of directors or Congress, but I don't always want it to be elected because sometimes it's just the person with the loudest chopsticks, loudest freaking mouth, or loudest chompers. So say chompers. What the freak? Loudest chompers is the ones with the loudest, their muscles are only in their face. They're not actually working with their hands. Lottery system will actually have people working with their hands next to the person whose muscles are only on their face. You see what I'm saying? Anyway, that's besides the point. Under like a board of directors, a public corporation will have a lottery-based system for our pass-through voting system. So if let's say 60% of the equity in the United States is in our Social Security system with the personalized accounts. State and federal don't get any votes, but personal does. They have 60% of the votes. I would argue that let's say a board of 12 directors, they need at least two lottery-based winners for seats. However, board of directors, I don't want it to be all equity holders. Now, this is going to sound a little bit socialist, a little bit crazy, but get with me here. I want 15% of seats to be labor. Now, that 15% isn't 50%. They don't own the whole corporation. They own 15% of the control. And what this will do, have one of the seats, if it's, let's say, 12 people, one of the seats will be lottery-based, and one of the seats will be elected. I want it to always be, most of the time I want it to have two seats. If there, let's say it's 10 people, 2 of the seats are labor. And one of them's lottery and one's elected. So you just randomly pull a hat. This guy's going to be in the board of directors for 2 years. He's going to learn everything he's going to know for 2 years, and then he's going to get out of there, and the next person's going to be in the lottery. Board of directors can just rehire whoever they want over and over again. Or the shareholders can elect whoever they want. Workers can elect that one guy, and then the shareholders will elect the 75% of the guy, whatever. Right? So that's the ideal anyway. We want to make pass-through voting because the problem is, right now in our system, index funds choose the board of directors. Not the index fund holders, but the index fund managers. Pick the managers for the other corporations. I want to go through them, meaning pass through, meaning go through the board of directors of the index fund entirely and just have the individual, me, as the shareholder, vote directly for the board of directors in a publicly traded stock company. So, I mean, arguably this system, yes, are we giving a little bit of power to the socialists? Yes, but I argue if we don't give power to some socialists, they're going to complain. They're going to think, oh, it's all controlled by capital. So we have to give them something. We have to give them a bone. I'm sorry, I don't like socialism like the next guy, but at least have a little bit of accountability. Let labor look in the hood so they don't have to complain that much. It's going to be a lot harder to strike when the person who's on the board of directors actually knows where the money goes. It's going to be a lot harder. Oh, guys, this is where the money goes for our stuff. This is where our pallet jack money goes. This is where all the capital. No worker wants to pay for their own pallet jack. No worker wants to pay for the machines in the warehouse. That's the shareholder's job. And so the reason why you need workers in there, just to know what's going on for the shareholders. The shareholders and workers should work together. You know, they should never be separate. And they generally do in most given corporations, but there's no laborers actually in these board of directors. They are technically, some of them are work employees, like a CEO and a chairman are two different people. There are separation of powers in British companies. There are separation of powers. In American companies, they're fused together. We don't believe in separation of powers. in the American system, because some CEOs and chairmen are not separated, but in the British system they are. CEO is an employee, chairman's the highest leading voice in a board of directors. CEO is accountable to the chairman, although if they're two people, they're accountable to themselves, I guess. So it's a little weird, but that being said, I don't really care about the separation of powers as much. I'm okay with having a CEO chairman. The thing I care about is having that normal voice of this is a regular index fund holder like me who's not very wealthy, or a regular laborer in there, even if they have no idea what the freak they're doing, they don't know what the heck's going on, let them actually have a voice, or at least a say. With the 12 votes, they have at least 2 votes. Lottery is better than elections. I hate the idea of democracy. Democracy is a disaster. I have not seen a single democratic system actually function. Lottery at least makes more sense. Athens functioned for, I think, a good 100 years of lottery. I'm not saying elections. We had elections for the past 250 years in the United States. They've worked relatively recently, or relatively well, but it's becoming so corrupt that under my new system, corruption would basically be outlawed because the shareholders wouldn't put up with it. Under my system, the shareholders actually make the corporations more accountable. That's the problem right now. There's an agency problem. The people that own the equities of the stock market don't have a say on what happens to those stocks as much. I want kind of to have a little bit more agency. Not too much where, an index fund company, let's say I'm only one guy that owns an index fund, everybody else just doesn't vote. I want there to be, the problem is people aren't going to want to do all those kind of elections, but I do think that we should. If we really feel like we actually own it, because right now I feel like we're in a renter society. Even in republicanism means you're part of a republic. Right? When you vote in somebody, they don't have any incentive to keep the coffers of the state clean. You know what they do? They take the money for themselves because they don't know if they're going to run the next election. They want to screw over the other guy and then blame him for his own decisions. Republicanism has failed. Democracy has failed. Lottery-based system might not work. It's still short-term because monarchy, for instance, right? You take the money, your son gets screwed over. They blame you and the son who doesn't have any coffers. He has to figure out a way to fix it. You've just destroyed your whole family's power plus the kingdom at the same time. Monarchy has the incentive structure. But under my system, everybody's the monarch. So everybody has a long-term incentive to have those corporations work in the long-term interest of everybody. In the United States right now, it's short-term interest. CEOs get registered stock units that are only 3 or 5 years. That's not enough time. It needs to be 10 to 15 years. It cannot be less than 5 years. It just doesn't make sense. I want a long-term society. Our tax code does incentivize long-term investing, but it's not enough. We need to actually punish it. Because the problem is we have too many grifters, like Mr. Donald, who's the president. He's also a grifter. He freaking trades, 3,000 times in 3 months. That's utterly ridiculous. It makes no sense. I don't want short-term trading. I want long-term growth. And even if the growth is 5%, at least we're going to be making almost the same percentage as a billionaire. Come on, people. This is pretty obvious. We need to reform our Social Security system. So I'm asking my senator, or my Maryland senator, whoever they happen to be, my 2 Maryland senators, and I forgot the woman who runs my district. I'm asking them to at least propose my idea on the floor. Even if it isn't what they like, they don't like a 3-tiered system where 17% goes to your own personal account, 2% goes to the state of Maryland, 1% goes to the federal, and if your personal account runs out, you use the Maryland funds. If the Maryland account runs out, then you use the federal funds. Okay, I still would lock away the state money where they can only spend 3% a year. But at least we have something for the poor people. They can use that 2% money. And eventually, the ideal is that compounding rate. Eventually, all the poor people that have lost limbs and are veterans and stuff like that, blah, blah, blah. Once they've used up the resources, and let's say the compounding's faster than what we're spending for them, then we also have teacher salaries, and then we get rid of property taxes. And the ideal is to reduce our tax burden. Yeah, we get taxed at 20% rates at the beginning. And there's going to be a period where traditional Social Security and my Social Security system is conflicted, a 10-year window. And after that, we switched over, and our society becomes way wealthier. We're investing like billionaires. We're investing like we actually run the place. Long term. We actually incentivize society to think long term instead of short term. And that's the big problem. You know, The Battle for the Soul of Capitalism. If you've ever read that book, it's one of my favorite books of all time. Battle for the Soul of Capitalism. There's long-term capitalists and short-term capitalists. That's the battle for the soul of capitalism right now. You got the CEOs and the other people, they're all short-termists. And then you got the shareholders who literally invest for 40 years, they're long-termists. We need to gear our society more towards the long-term people. That's our problem. And we will never fix it unless Congress actually knows what to do. And I understand the government, they're afraid of government controlling things, but we will ban them from voting in the board of directors. We'll ban them, and they'll have a cap. They can't own more than 3% of any given corporation, federal government, 1% for state. Once they own 1% of any given corporation in the index fund, they have to go straight to bonds. They can't own anything more than 1% of Amazon. Once they own, like if it's a big 7 and they own more than 1% of that given stock, they're not allowed anymore. Not allowed to own any more stock. You go straight to the bond index fund or government bonds, whatever. That's what I want. 70% stock, 30% bond until the cap hits, then whatever. And that's the problem. These people, they're not thinking like engineers. They just, we're just going to keep the same system, and maybe we'll uncap the income cap later on, the $130,000 per year. Because once you make over $130K, guess what? You don't pay any more Social Security tax. You only get taxed on $130K that you started with. I don't understand it. Like, at least, I don't know, uncap it, make everything a flat tax at 20%, everything else, sales tax, everything will be kept. Property tax will be kept until our index funds can keep up pace to pay our schools off. That's the ideal anyway. It's going to take a century for the school thing to happen, but the ideal is eventually my solution with everything, easy pass fees, index funds, school costs, index funds. My entire political ideology is index funds. Congress is so dumb. We have something that's been invented since 1975, and we're not using it, like, for political aims, for actually funding things. Yeah, we're just going to tax and spend it the current year. Why don't we have money set aside and have it compound faster than a savings bank? Why not? It only makes mathematical sense that it could work. Now, am I dumb? Is my plan theoretically going to collapse if the U.S. market, maybe stocks will slow down in the growth if everyone's piling into it? That could make sense. I could see that. But I don't know. If billionaires are doing it and nobody else is, and they're making money, why not do the same with the billionaire? Even if we're lowering the return rate by doing it, it's only going to lower the return rate by 1 or 2% based on my math that I've done off the top of my head. So maybe I'm wrong. Prove it. Left-wingers, socialists, or even people that are skeptical of reforming Social Security. Prove that I'm wrong. I don't want to run out of Social Security in 6 years. I'm going to have 77% less than the past generation. They get 100% of their expenses paid. I get 77%. How fair is that? That I'm paying for the current Social Security people. That's not fair at all. So we need to actually make it fair for everyone. You pay your own Social Security with your own account. And guess what? 3% go to the poor people who cannot afford to work or whatnot. Let's say you lost a limb. I'm actually okay with you contributing your own account and using the state account. I'm okay with that because your life sucks. You have no limbs. Okay, if you're in a wheelchair or you got the hand's completely gone, I'm okay with you double dipping. I don't want to incentivize you from not working. That's not a society I want to live in. I want a society where if you work, you get more money. And if you don't work, and let's say you're just physically not able to, or even mentally, if you're a little bit way mentally screwed up, and really mentally screwed up, because there are a lot of screwed up people, I think that would be way too high. But if it's like really crazy, then yes, you deserve state funds at that point. So that's really the society I want to build. Some people would say it's socialist. I wouldn't say it's socialist by any means. Some people say it's capitalist. Some people say it's in between. I don't know what you call it. It's a political solution, index funds. That's all I'm going to call it. Maybe it's an index fund political party. Honestly, I think the Republicans should grow on that. Republicans love index funds more than Democrats, and rarely hear Democrats talk about index funds. Honestly, no politician really talks about index funds, but I think index funds are the future. They really are. They're growing. They used to be only 10% of the market, now 30% of the market. There's no stopping index funds from being the future of the investing world. And so because of that, I think that politicians need to look at that as a solution to the Social Security problem and other things, like we could pay off the Easy Pass people in 30 years if we just put some of the Easy Pass money in an index fund, pay off the bondholders who profit off the Easy Pass tolls. Like, come on, guys, we can do this. I believe in ourselves. But, of course, our politicians are too short-term. They only focus about the 2 years they're in office. They're not worried about the 30 years that people are saving up to retire, that they don't want to work anymore. They're like, no, you're still going to work. In our society, we're going to spend way too much money, and then you're going to have to pay more taxes. I don't want to live in that society. The only way we're going to do that is with index funds. The only way we're going to be able to retire as workers, index funds. So, maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you agree with me. I just want to hear your opinions. Whoever you are in the political spectrum, I don't really care. Republican, Democrat, Socialist, non-Socialist. I would call myself a non-Socialist. What's your political opinion on my index fund party or my index fund solution? Anyway, goodbye. Gluehuffers, goodbye.